Our tribute to those who served, suffered, and died. But there are other stories, theories that massive tragedies always breed, stories of doubt, answers with only questions to come. As Mark Twain said, get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. Facts and questions in hand, we feature a debate about Flight 77 and the Pentagon calamity. Craig Ranke is a co-founder of Citizens Investigation Team. With CIT, Craig has personally conducted dozens of video and audio-recorded interviews with witnesses to the 9/11 Pentagon event, some filmed on location in the exact spots from which they observed the plane that day. Debating Craig is Anthony Summers, co-author of The 11th Day, the full story of 9/11 on Osama bin Laden. Anthony Summers is a best-selling biographer and journalist and has covered the pivotal stories of the past 100 years and in many cases forced a rethink. Now, in 2011, he brings a sharp focus to a full account of 9/11, the events that led up to it, and the troubling questions that remain.
The notion that I believe that a plane did not hit the Pentagon, I differ utterly. I think it's entirely obvious to the dogs in the street, and indeed to the people in the street and around the place at the time, that a plane absolutely did hit the Pentagon.
Craig?
Yeah, that's the primary point of the debate here, I believe.
Yep.
That's clearly where we disagree. Mr. Summers, on the inside sleeve of your book, you describe it as, quote, the first panoramic authoritative account of 9/11, end quote. And you also went on to proclaim that you, quote, thoroughly consider the contentions of the 9/11 truth movement, end quote. I contend that this is a false statement with regard to our findings, and will proceed to demonstrate this. On page 102, you reference our organization, Citizen Investigation Team, by name. You introduced and quoted us by saying, a group calling itself Citizen Investigation Team claimed in 2010 to have proof that, quote, the plane that was seen flying low over Arlington on 9/11 did not, in fact, hit the Pentagon, end quote. You then continued, rather, it pulled up and flew over it at the last moment. All parts the authors would have us believe of a, quote, skillfully executed deception, end quote. You went on to speculate, quote, only a tiny community of believers, perhaps, credit such bizarre hypotheses, end quote. Now, just so the listeners are clear, this is the full extent with which you address us in your entire book. You not only failed to attempt to refute the eyewitness evidence that we present with counter-testimony, you failed to even acknowledge that we provide eyewitness evidence at all, even though that was clearly the focus of our investigation. You chose to ignore over a dozen corroborated first-hand witness accounts and the implications of an approach of the aircraft north of the Sicko gas station, as they unanimously report, and instead resorted to blanket dismissal of our statements taken out of context of the evidence. You used scare quotes as a literary tactic to ridicule our claims, while pejoratively labeling and dismissing what we assert as, quote, bizarre. This demonstrates that you either did not thoroughly consider our contentions, as you claimed you did in the sleeve of your book, or that you deliberately omitted the evidence that supports the statements that you quoted from our website. Now, here's my opening question for you. In your book, I counted that you cited 9 eyewitnesses to the Pentagon plane, with 3 of them being unnamed. Can you please tell me which of these 9 witnesses, if any, that you personally spoke with to verify their accounts firsthand?
Mr. Summers?
Yes, I would take issue with much that Mr. Ranke has just said, but I would point out to listeners that although we refer only once to Mr. Ranke and his associate, who have, as far as I can tell, are essentially what he calls his group, that in fact, further on in our book, around 10 pages further on, we deal in detail with the whole notion of the notion that no planes hit the Pentagon and that it might have been a missile and so on and so forth. So although we don't come back to him and his colleagues specifically again, we do deal with the issues. And I would just say quickly there that there is not just the evidence of the people who said that they saw the plane hit the Pentagon, although that's obviously very important. There's also the the recorded information of the day, I've got here the audio of the phone traffic between American Airlines and Federal Aviation Control, in which they talk about, we're missing another flight. That's American Airlines. And they're asked, what flight are they missing? And they say they're missing Flight 77. There is also the air-to-ground transmissions between Colonel Steve O'Brien, who was lying in a military aircraft near the scene at the time, and you can hear him saying, with the usual snap, crackle, and pop that goes with air-to-ground transmissions, but you can completely clearly hear him saying that he's watching an aircraft that is, quote, still in a descent, and then a little bit later he says, that aircraft's down, and then a little bit after that he says, it looks like that aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, sir. Now, this is original information.
Craig?
Well, first, Mr. Summers, you sidestepped my question.
Well, no, but deal with this part first, if you would, because it is very important.
Deal with my question. It's quite simple. Well, I can even add to the part that you answered. Have you spoken with Lieutenant Colonel Steve O'Brien, the pilot of the C-130 pilot? And have you spoken with any of the 9 eyewitnesses to the Pentagon plane that you cite in your book?
No, I have not, but at the back of the book I have indicated exactly where their comments came from. And I think their comment, as far as I'm concerned, their comments are credible. If you take all of the information together, there can be no doubt at all that an aircraft hit the Pentagon. I would add to what I've just said about the in real-time transmissions and phone calls that with time-recorded stamps on them and so on. I would add that we have from the 9/11 Commission files the analysis of Flight 77's flight data recorder, crucial evidence in any airplane crash. And that includes, at page 13, I believe, a graph based on the reading from the recorder of the descent profile of Flight 77 from 35,000 feet to, obviously, since it crashed, 0 feet.
Not 35,000.
Flight 77 most certainly did crash.
Well, okay, the point is here that you have not spoken with these witnesses.
Okay, but
Now, I will tell you that I have, our organization has had an email conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Steve O'Brien, the pilot of the C-130, and he confirmed with us that he did not see a plane hit the Pentagon, and that he did see the plane as it passed by him, and then after he was told to turn around to try and tail it, he lost sight of it. And in fact, when he first reported that they saw the explosion, he admitted that he was so far away from the building at the time that he could not even tell that the explosion was coming from the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon is the largest low-rise structure on Earth. So if he's in the air and cannot tell that the explosion is coming from the Pentagon, he would not be able to see a plane, which is minuscule compared to the Pentagon, flying away.
All right, let me ask this, Craig. Let me ask this, and Anthony.
Can I just interject there, because
I think let me move on here just for a bit.
Mr. Ranke has just made a very, very serious statement, saying that he has this email from the colonel who, in the official version, said he saw a plane crash into the Pentagon.
No, he did not say that.
If that is true, it is major worldwide news, and Mr. Ranke should make the email public, and the colonel should be asked to account for it, if indeed it is an email from him, and if he actually says what he's just been quoted as saying.
Is it public?
It's public, and we have, it's on our website, and we've reported on this in many reports, so it's out there. We've actually pressed him to speak on this more, but he no longer wants to, because he understands the implications, I'm sure. But the point being that out of the 9 witnesses that we've spoken with dozens of witnesses firsthand, and out of the 9 witnesses that you cite, none of which that you've spoken with, we've spoken with 5 of them personally. So I can tell you we don't necessarily claim that their accounts aren't credible. In fact, we know that several of their accounts are credible, very much so, and contradict the official impact narrative.
Okay. Let's leave that for the moment, gentlemen. I would point out that in my research, there's 106 witnesses that have testified that they have seen it, the plane. But anyway, what happened, Craig?
I believe that is true.
Yeah, Craig, what happened to Renee May, the flight attendant on the plane, if your theory is correct?
Well, I have no answer to that because I've never had the chance to speak with Renee May, nor do I believe that she's still alive. However, the eyewitness evidence that we present demonstrates that she absolutely did not die in a plane crash in the Pentagon. So that's the simple fact.
You do concede that you had conversation, that she was on the phone, and that the plane had been hijacked, Flight 77 had been hijacked?
I personally have no confirmation because I'm not able to confirm anything about that. The source, she's gone. That's provided for by sources that are not independent, and I have no confirmation for that. What I have confirmation for is that over a dozen witnesses in the best locations to judge the location of the plane in relation to the Citgo gas station, which is the final landmark in front of the building, unequivocally placed the plane on the north side of the gas station, which fatally contradicts all official reports, data, and the physical damage, starting with the downed light poles.
So you do recognize, did you interview any of the...
Can I just interject there?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Sure, go ahead.
Yes. I'm not sure how useful this part of the conversation is to listeners, especially what Mr. Ranke is saying about his witnesses. As far as I can gather, he talked to these witnesses not close to the date, but around 2005, 2006. Would I be right?
Yes, that's when our investigation was launched.
Is that correct?
Several of their accounts are also recorded by the government. We have official accounts.
Is that correct that you spoke to the witnesses
in 2001?
In 2005 or thereafter?
No. Again, if you're listening to me, that's when we spoke.
I'm just asking whether it is correct that you spoke to your witnesses as late as at least the middle of the decade.
Now, if you're listening to me, some of these witnesses were also interviewed by the officials, the Center for Military History or the Library of Congress, where they placed the plane in the same place in 2001.
Okay, let's move on, gentlemen. Please.
There is actually something else I want to say about that.
Quickly, please.
As I understand it, that all of their witnesses who were in a position to see the Pentagon say that they saw the plane hit. Now, they may say that they saw the plane coming from a different direction, and one of the very first lessons I learned as a very young reporter was I was sent out to report on a bicycle crash. A little boy had been knocked down by a car, and I came back, and the editor said to me, "What color was the bike?" And I said, "I don't know, sir." I was 18 or 19 years old. And he said, "Go out and find out again." Now, it didn't make any difference whether the bike was blue or red or yellow, but the details were what mattered. And what you do discover at things as simple as a child being knocked down, a child on a bike being knocked down by a car, is that you have all sorts of different stories from eyewitnesses right there on the day. As I understand it, at least a large number of Mr. Ranke's witnesses were interviewed many years later, and the point I'm trying to make is that their versions are likely to vary on the day. Certainly they'll vary years later.
All right.
And Let me move on, please. Apparently,
hang
on the building.
Gentlemen, okay, I think we discussed the witness situation enough. There are, like I said, 106 witnesses that verify a plane. My question to you, gentlemen, again, if it's not a plane, and I'll start with Craig. Craig, I have interviewed and will be interviewing today a fireman who testified told me just the other day that he saw the landing gear of the plane. He saw parts of the plane, right there on the field. Another person that I've spoken to at the Pentagon, as a matter of fact, said that they, saw a seat from the cockpit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all the photos, of course, that do show American Airlines pieces of metal and everything on the ground. I have a fireman who was on the scene in 5 minutes. 5 minutes he was there, who reports exactly the same thing about seeing the metal, seeing seats, seeing some people actually burning in seats, etc. These are people I've personally spoken to. How would you account for that?
There are photographs, Danica, of people strapped in their seats still dead inside the Pentagon.
Yeah. How would you...
Well, that's absolutely untrue. The photographs do not show seats of plane. They show seats inside the Pentagon office workers. So that's a big different story.
But answer what I just gave to you, Craig, if you would, please.
Right. Well, what's clear is that if, of course, the eyewitness evidence we present is accurate, and both of you have misconstrued it in the sense that they do not vary. These accounts, over a dozen of them, independently corroborate each other. Yes, after the fact, but also in 2001 when they were interviewed by the officials. So it's the independent corroboration that demonstrates the specific, simple detail accurate. Of course, we know that eyewitness testimony is fallible and that no eyewitness is typically 100% correct about all details, nor do we expect that.
But how do you